The grand assembly chamber of the conquered of nebulous sovereigns was not built for silence, yet it was the silence that pressed down, a colossal, invisible weight of shared dread that eclipsed the glow of the thousands of synthesized stars embedded in the cyclopean dome above. The chamber was an architectural manifestation of the conquered itself, a fractal spiral of ascending platforms, each bearing the delegation of a single sovereign species, spiraling inward toward the central ocular where the true, terrifying image was projected. The air, a composite blend suitable for the metabolic needs of the uncountable delegates, mammalian, silicate, gaseous, and energetic, was thick with a charged, metallic tang of fear and mobilized power. It was here, in this heart of galactic governance, that the fate of the entire conquered, representing a colossal fraction of known intelligent life, was being held hostage by a singular, unmoving shadow. On the ocular, the projection was stark, baffling in its simplicity and maddening in its implication. A single, black-hulled vessel of alien design, inert within the deepest layers of the contested Kepler expanse. Around it, the digital representation of the conquered's response shimmered, a vast, unimaginable concentric sphere of military hardware, an orbital geometry of layered, overwhelming deterrents that collectively represented the largest single mobilization of the CNS defense fleet in the history of the conquered's millennia-long existence. Every sensor reading, every tactical projection, every quantum-entangled communication focused on that solitary point of impossible stillness. The visual scale was a nightmare made manifest. The singular, approximately kilometer-long spindle of the unknown vessel, dwarfed 1,000 times over by the sheer, unholy multitude of frigates, destroyers, capital carriers, and interdiction platforms that encircled it, a physical interpretation of the title's impossible arithmetic. 100,000 minds, 100,000 ships, reduced to impotent stasis by the presence of one. The official fleet count was, by deliberate decree, never spoken aloud in the chamber, the raw numerical value too destabilizing to the collective psyche. It was merely referred to, with chilling understatement, as the encirclement. From the second highest platform, the representative of the Krill hierarchs, a towering figure of articulated obsidian chitin named Strategos Vash, delivered a pronouncement that rattled the silence like an impact tremor. His voice, synthesized through the assembly's universal translation matrix, was a low, resonant rumble that carried the undeniable weight of military impatience. It has been 72 cycles since the initial detection, 72 cycles of pure, unadulterated silence. We have offered 5 distinct channels of communication, utilized every known protocol of first contact, and transmitted every universally recognized symbol of both peace and ultimatum. The vessel remains unresponsive, its systems dormant, its intention a void. This is not the posture of diplomacy. It is an act of calculated, incomprehensible aggression. An insult of this magnitude, sustained against the full, visible might of the conquered, is itself an existential declaration. I demand the immediate, calculated, total annihilation of the object. The risk of prolonged inaction far outweighs the negligible loss of esoteric knowledge this object might contain. Vash's multifaceted eyes, dark and flat like polished hematite, swept the spiral, challenging the inherent caution of the other delegates. The Krill were the martial spine of the conquered, their civilization founded on the principle of decisive, overwhelming action. Their patience was a finite, rapidly depleting resource. The retort came, not from an opposing military force, but from the most ancient species in the assembly, the Silos. Delegate Lyra, a sentient nexus of crystallized light contained within a heavy gravity-neutralized sphere, hovered near the ocular, her spectral presence a counterpoint to the Krill's dark materiality. Annihilation, Strategos Vash, is the cessation of possibility. We observe an object that has navigated the deep void, pierced the most layered defenses of the conquered strategic core, and yet expends no energy, shows no hostile signature, and makes no maneuver of either retreat or advance. Its shield signature, though faint, is of a composition entirely unknown, a structural integrity that has, so far, defied even the most dedicated remote analysis from the encirclement. It is an act of inactivity, not aggression, that holds us in thrall. And yet you define it as a threat worthy of the very act that the conquered was founded to prevent, a panic-driven, preemptive strike against the fundamentally unknown. The danger of this ship is not its weaponry, but the way it is forcing us to question the very foundation of our certainty. What if the silence is not a challenge, but a profound, alien form of paralysis or a cultural protocol we cannot fathom? To fire is to lose the only opportunity to understand. Lyra's voice was a melodic hum that resonated directly with the neural clusters of the assembled delegates, a deliberate, calming contrast to Vash's aggressive projection. The political and philosophical tension within the chamber was a palpable force, a silent storm raging around the inert vessel. The Conquered was a brittle alliance of fear and mutual dependence, held together by the memory of the catastrophic unification wars. The sudden, inexplicable appearance of a single, unreadable variable, a vessel designated merely unregistered contact 01, threatened to fracture the fragile peace more effectively than any invading armada. The core fear, the one strategos Vash refused to articulate fully, was that any response, no matter how overwhelming, might trigger a catastrophic and unknown counter-response. They had arrayed forces of such magnitude that their own logistical backbone was stretched thin, yet the target remained serenely indifferent, a black needle in a haystack of kinetic fury. It was Ambassador Kalen of the Valen, the Conquered's primary diplomatic and logical assessment species, who finally cut through the escalating debate, his platform ascending slowly to the central focal point beneath the ocular. The Valen were recognized for their unparalleled capacity for dispassionate multi-vector analysis. Kalen's form was slender and pale, his movements measured, almost painfully slow, emphasizing the gravity of his words. The analysis must shift from the tactical to the ontological. We have identified the origins of the vessel as belonging to a species designated by our deep void reconnaissance probes as humans, a relatively nascent, fast-evolving civilization located far outside the Conquered's immediate spheres of influence. Their recorded history is brief, characterized by periods of internal, localized conflict, followed by rapid, almost exponential technological leaps. They are, by all metrics, a cultural and technological anomaly. Their trajectory suggests an aggressive curiosity, yet their current posture is one of absolute nullification. We are facing a paradox. Kalen paused, letting the implications settle into the anxious minds of the delegates. The initial intelligence reports on this species were, admittedly, dismissive. They were considered a Tier 3A risk, capable of localized threat, but easily contained or absorbed into the Conquered sphere through diplomatic pressure or technological parity. The consensus was that their technology, while kinetic and robust, was fundamentally primitive compared to the Conquered's mastery of energy manipulation and subspace distortion. This single vessel invalidates that consensus. The energy required to maintain its current shield integrity, if the shield is merely dormant, surpasses the theoretical output of an entire Conquered battle group. The very existence of this ship, which appears to defy multiple established laws of physics as understood by the collective CNS scientific matrix, is a more potent threat than any armament it might deploy. A shudder passed through the assembly, the sound almost indistinguishable from the low-frequency hum of the chamber's life support systems. The Krill hierarch's platform remained still, but the light within Vash's optical sensors seemed to dim slightly, acknowledging the cold, hard logic of the Valen assessment. The problem was no longer military, it was philosophical and technological. The ship was dangerous not because it could destroy them, but because its very nature threatened to dismantle their understanding of the cosmos, stripping away the technological superiority that was the true bedrock of the Conquered's power structure. The logical conclusion, based on the principle of maximum potential threat, Kalen continued, his voice barely above a whisper but amplified to fill the immense space, is that this vessel is a scout, not for a fleet, but for an entirely new paradigm of civilization. A civilization that can afford to send a single, seemingly defenseless vessel into a known, highly aggressive territory, knowing full well the reaction it would elicit, and yet remaining entirely unconcerned. We have arrayed forces capable of extinguishing a star, and they are met with silence. This silence is the loudest possible declaration of superiority. The humans, whom we dismissed as children playing with fire, have arrived with a single artifact that suggests they have moved beyond fire and are now manipulating the very forces of existence we barely understand. The ocular pulsed, momentarily shifting the image from the inert black ship to a simple, white-on-black alphanumeric designation. UNREG Contact 01, status, stasis NON response. Time elapsed, 72.4 cycles. The time itself was a weapon, each passing cycle eroding the diplomatic and military coherence of the Conquered. The longer the stalemate persisted, the deeper the political schisms grew. Strategos Vash saw the conquered bleeding authority. Ambassador Kalen saw the necessary prelude to a paradigm shift. Then the impossible happened. On the ocular, the alphanumeric designation flickered, briefly replaced by a different label, superimposed over the black-hulled vessel, HMS Peregrine. And then the stasis light, which had been a solid, deep red on every sensor readout, blinked once, a simple, non-threatening green. Simultaneously, all active sensor systems aboard the encirclement suffered a momentary, complete blackout, a collective, instantaneous network failure that lasted precisely 0.003 seconds. It was a technical impossibility, an event that defied the Concord's distributed, redundant systems. It was a calculated, silent demonstration of absolute control. The Grand Assembly erupted in a cacophony of fear, outrage, and technical alarm. Strategos Vash was instantly on his feet, his synthesized voice a roar that overwhelmed the noise. "It has awakened. It has penetrated our network. Fire! I rescind all previous cautions. Commence the simultaneous, full-spectrum kinetic and energy barrage. Contain the threat immediately." But before the panic-stricken order could be relayed through the compromised command structure of the encirclement, Ambassador Kalen, his pale form suddenly radiating an intensity that eclipsed the Krill's fury, raised a hand of crystalline structure. "Silence! Strategos, you must observe. The power fluctuation was minimal. The network penetration was surgical, not destructive. It was a knock, Vash, not a breach." On the ocular, the green light on the Peregrine remained steady. And then a new signal appeared, not on the emergency military frequency, but directly injected into the Assembly's primary, secure diplomatic channel. The channel reserved only for intersovereign dialogue within the chamber itself. It was not a chaotic burst of unintelligible noise, nor a complex coded transmission. It was a single, pure, astonishingly simple data packet, a video feed focused on one face. The face was, by the Concord's established metrics of aesthetics, unremarkable. It was a human male, middle-aged, with deep, calm eyes and an expression that bordered on professional boredom. He was in a simple, gray-toned uniform devoid of ostentatious rank insignia. The background was a bridge, functional and clean, with minimal, non-threatening instrumentation. The light in the room was soft, ambient. The man looked directly into the camera, and therefore directly into the collective ocular of the Assembly. The sudden, intimate proximity of the unknown entity, juxtaposed against the colossal, distant threat of the encirclement, was a psychological shock that silenced the chamber instantly. The human cleared his throat, a small, organic sound that echoed unnervingly in the vastness of the alien hall. When he spoke, his voice was measured, deep, and utterly calm, transmitted through the universal matrix with flawless, synthesized clarity. "This is Captain Alastair Thorne, commanding officer of the human survey vessel Peregrine. We apologize for the extended period of non-response, which was required for a necessary recalibration of our communication protocols following the unexpected detection of a statistically overwhelming force field deployment in what we had designated as an unpatrolled sector. We assure the assembled parties that our period of stasis was utilized not for aggression, but for the calculation of the minimal possible non-escalatory response to a profound and, frankly, quite alarming misunderstanding. We have now completed the necessary diagnostics and are operational. We detected your collective distress signals and offer a formal, ethical explanation for our presence." Thorne paused, his eyes sweeping the invisible, terrified audience, displaying a patience that was utterly alien to the Concord's high-strung politics. "We observed the deployment of a magnificent, vast fleet. We calculated the potential for kinetic catastrophe that the loss of command and control in such an array would represent. Our primary directive is the preservation of life and the avoidance of unintended conflict. We elected to enter a near-total systems lockdown, maintaining only the minimal necessary shield frequency and a predictive tactical matrix, a state you correctly identified as stasis. We did this to force your fleet into a state of temporary corresponding stasis, preventing any panic-driven preemptive action from the encircling command structure, which would, statistically, have resulted in a disproportionate and unnecessary loss of life, primarily on your side, but tragically also on ours. Our intent was to buy time for a rational diplomatic exchange. We now have that time." The silence that followed this declaration was denser than before, a suffocating vacuum where all the air of assumption had been suddenly expelled. Led the sheer, audacious confidence of the claim, that they had shut down to prevent the conquered from accidentally killing itself, was more terrifying than any plasma volley. The philosophical gravity of the human statement hit the assembly with the weight of a stellar collapse. They were not facing a crazed military aggressor. They were facing a being whose power was so absolute that its primary concern was the ethical management of alien panic. Ambassador Kalen, recovering first, gestured for a direct link to the human. "Captain Thorne, we are the assembly of the conquered of nebulous sovereigns. Your claim is unprecedented. Your vessel, the Peregrine, has breached the security parameters of a core strategic zone and, by your own admission, possessed the capability to disable our sensor network instantaneously. Yet you claim non-aggression. Define the technology that allows a single vessel to neutralize the sensor capabilities of a combined fleet of this magnitude. This information is required to verify your claim of ethical non-escalation." Captain Thorne listened, his expression unchanged, a slight tilt of his head suggesting polite consideration. "Ambassador Kalen, the neutralization of your sensor net was not an act of technological aggression. It was a simple, energetic filter applied at the local space-time curvature around the Peregrine. Your sensors operate on predictable, electromagnetic, and subspace harmonic principles. Our shield system, which is more accurately described as a localized, adaptive space-time distortion field, simply utilize the ambient energy from your own fleet's massive sensor output to create a temporary phase shift, effectively making the immediate region undetectable to you for that micro-moment. It was a demonstration of capacity, not a weapon deployment. It required negligible internal energy and was the fastest way to acquire the required attention without initiating a kinetic exchange." He paused, a flicker of something that might have been gentle condescension crossing his face. "Regarding the Peregrine's capabilities, we are an exploratory platform. Our purpose is to map, observe, and engage in ethical first contact. We did not come armed for a sustained conflict against a sovereign power. However, it is an unfortunate reality of the cosmos that the most efficient defensive systems often rely on principles that, to a less developed civilization, appear to be acts of utter, incomprehensible power. Our drive system and shielding are merely applications of unified field mechanics. For the sake of diplomacy, know this. The cumulative energy of your magnificent fleet, if discharged against the Peregrine simultaneously, would be utilized by our distortion field as nothing more than a momentary power boost, causing negligible harm to the hull and resulting in a spectacular, but entirely non-lethal discharge of energy back into your formations. We designed it this way. We do not carry weaponry capable of mass destruction. We carry technology that renders mass destruction irrelevant." The admission hung in the air, a physical, sickening blow to the collective Krill hierarchs. Strategos Vash, for the first time, was silent, his chitinous armor seeming to deflate with the sudden, brutal realization of irrelevance. The single ship was not just dangerous, it was an entirely new category of problem. It had effectively negated the primary principle of the conquered's power, the sheer weight of numbers. The human philosophical approach was terrifying. They had achieved absolute defensive capability first, rendering all offensive posturing obsolete before even engaging. Delegate Lyra of the Silos, her light shimmering with renewed intensity, addressed the captain. "Captain Thorne, your species' decision to prioritize non-escalation and defensive saturation over offensive capability is an anomaly in the known galactic history. Most nascent powers, upon achieving such a technological apex, immediately leverage it for territorial gain or resource acquisition. Why the restraint? Why the ethical focus? Your species' historical record, as catalogued by our remote observation, suggests a volatile, often self-destructive internal history." Thorne acknowledged the question with a subtle nod, the action profoundly human and therefore deeply unsettling in its context. "Your observation of our history is accurate, Delegate Lyra. We are a volatile species. We nearly destroyed ourselves, twice on a planetary scale. It was precisely that proximity to absolute self-inflicted annihilation that forced the philosophical and scientific pivot. We realized that true, sustainable power is not the ability to destroy, but the absolute, ironclad, and non-negotiable capacity not to. The technological leaps you observe, the unified field applications, the propulsion, and the adaptive shielding were the direct, driven result of an ethical mandate. We must find a technology that makes war impractical, inefficient, and strategically impossible for ourselves and anyone we encounter. We did not achieve peace by learning to kill better, We achieved it by learning to make killing irrelevant. The Peregrine is not a scout for an armada. It is a survey vessel for a civilization that has transcended the need for war. The captain's words resonated with an unnerving, almost religious finality. The philosophical reflection demanded by the scenario had arrived, not from an ancient, wise, conquered species, but from the human, the nascent, aggressive unknown. The long-held arrogance of the conquered, the comfortable belief in their own hierarchical superiority, shattered under the weight of this ethical logic. They had prepared for a kinetic exchange, a power struggle, and were instead presented with a moral and technological chasm they could not bridge. Ambassador Kalen, ever the pragmatist, saw the path forward. Captain Thorne, the conquered assembly requires a formal ratified treaty of engagement and recognition. Your ethical posture is noted. Your technological capacity is observed. We offer immediate diplomatic status and request a full, detailed, and verifiable explanation of your propulsion and shielding mechanics, not for appropriation, but for the necessary calibration of our future engagements with your species. Captain Thorne smiled, a flicker of genuine, unthreatening human warmth in his eyes. Ambassador, we anticipated this. The full data packets, transcribed into your foundational mathematical language, are already packaged and prepared for transmission. We do not hoard knowledge that promotes ethical advancement. However, the mechanism of data transfer is critical. I must inform you that the required bandwidth for the comprehensive data package is substantial. It necessitates a direct, high-capacity, dedicated subspace link, one which, regrettably, the Peregrine is not configured to establish with a combined fleet array, even one as sophisticated as the encirclement. Our system is designed for point-to-point ethical exchange with a single, high-level diplomatic entity. He paused, a deliberate, cinematic flourish in his delivery. We require a diplomatic ship, a single vessel from the conquered, to approach the Peregrine and establish a direct, short-range, dedicated link. We will transfer the data, and in return, we request a full mapping of your charted sectors, which we have inadvertently entered. This action will serve as the first necessary step in the establishment of a formal, peaceful conquered humanity diplomatic channel. The request was a masterful diplomatic trap. It demanded absolute trust, a single, vulnerable conquered ship approaching the vessel they had deemed a monumental threat, a gesture that would shatter the remaining political resistance of the Krill hierarchs. The vast, intimidating presence of the encirclement was suddenly rendered redundant, a spectacular monument to an obsolete paradigm. The true power was not in the 100,000 ships arrayed for war, but in the single, calm voice requesting one moment of peace. Strategos Vash's platform pulsed with internal light, a final, desperate surge of military resistance. This is a clear ploy, a trap. A single-vessel approach places the Conquered's representative at the mercy of the Peregrine's unknown internal weaponry. It is a demand for a hostage. Respect, Strategos, Captain Thorne interjected, his voice losing none of its calm. If we intended to take a hostage, we would have done so the moment we disabled your sensor network. We could have initiated any number of kinetic actions during the 72 cycles of your panic deliberation. We did not. Our request is procedural and technological. You have arrayed a force capable of unimaginable destruction. We offer an exchange of knowledge, which is the only currency of true power. If you cannot afford the small risk of sending one vessel to meet us, then your proclaimed unity and strength are merely a facade built on fear. It was Delegate Lyra of the Silos who made the decisive move, her crystalline light intensifying into a brilliant beacon. The Silos will dispatch a vessel. Our culture is founded on the pursuit of knowledge above all else. Ambassador Kalen, the Valen will accompany the Silos vessel to provide real-time, dispassionate analysis of the exchange environment. Strategos Vash, your fleet will hold position, inert, as a silent witness to a new era of engagement. The Conquered will accept the risk of the unknown, for the greater risk is the maintenance of our current, arrogant certainty. The consensus shifted, swiftly and irrevocably. The image of Strategos Vash, the embodiment of the martial spirit of the Conquered, slowly descending into the shadows of his platform, defeated not by force, but by an overwhelming moral and logical argument, was the most profound victory the human ship could have achieved. The single human vessel had redefined the very nature of power in the Concord. The 100,000 ships of the Conquered were now a majestic, immobile honor guard for the diplomatic exchange, a silent testament to the philosophical triumph of the Peregrine. The designated diplomatic vessel, the CNS Diplomatic Beacon 7, A small, unarmed Valen shuttle with a minimal crew detached from the encirclement with excruciating slowness, a single point of vulnerability against the backdrop of unimaginable military might. The ocular tracked its approach to the peregrine. The tension within the assembly did not diminish. It merely morphed from kinetic fear into the profound, emotional gravity of anticipation. This was the moment of Act II's zenith, the human reveal. As the Valen shuttle drew close, the peregrine did not open a docking bay. Instead, a section of its black hull dissolved into a shimmering field of pure, crystalline light, not a weapon, not a ramp, but a localized energy field that neutralized all potential interference. A voice, Captain Thorne's, calm and clear, transmitted directly to the shuttle's bridge. "Welcome, conquered representatives. The direct data transfer conduit is now active. Please hold steady." And then the large-scale reveal arrived, not as a technological disclosure, but as a cultural one. A small, autonomous drone emerged from the peregrine's hull. It did not carry weapons or tools. It carried a single, small, physical object, shielded in a localized null field. The drone approached the Valen shuttle and simply placed the object directly onto the ship's hull. The object was a data crystal, a device of such simple and elegant design that it was instantly recognizable as a universal storage medium. The deliberate act of placing a physical object, rather than trusting a complex quantum-entangled transfer, spoke volumes. It was a gesture of profound, ethical transparency and trust, an implicit statement that their knowledge was so powerful they could afford to physically hand it over. The Valen representatives quickly retrieved the crystal and plugged it into their diplomatic terminal. On the ocular, the conquered assembly witnessed the immediate data stream. It was not mere schematics. It was a deluge of foundational science, of unified field theory, of ethical protocols, of propulsion mechanics based on zero-point energy extraction, concepts that rendered the Concord's entire technological edifice suddenly quaint and inefficient. The sheer volume of knowledge was a shockwave. Then Captain Thorne's voice returned to the assembly, now laced with a new, subtle urgency. "The data transfer is complete. You will find that our shielding is indeed non-aggressive, but the underlying principles demand immediate, serious study. We offer this knowledge freely and in good faith. Now, Ambassador Kalen, I must respectfully transition this discussion from a diplomatic exchange to a shared crisis assessment. The original purpose of the Peregrine's deep void excursion was not mere exploration. We were following a faint, ancient echo, a gravitational wave signature that defied all known physics, originating from a direction far beyond the established galactic perimeter." Thorne's expression, for the first time, held a trace of genuine professional apprehension. "During our extended stasis, while calculating the proper non-escalatory response to your formidable fleet, our deep spectrum array, freed from the distraction of aggressive sensor pings, finally managed to isolate and clarify the nature of that signal. It is not an echo. It is a transmission, and it is being generated by a colossal, ancient stellar structure that is now inexplicably moving." The image on the ocular abruptly shifted. Gone was the serene picture of the Peregrine and the Concorde shuttle. The screen filled with a nightmarish astronomical rendering, a structure of impossible scale, far out on the galactic rim. It was a partially completed Dyson swarm, kilometers thick, an array of planetary engines and solar collectors, but clearly not a natural formation, nor one built by any known civilization. It was too vast, too geometric, too ancient. And the analysis tags flashing across the image indicated one thing. The swarm was not abandoned. It was operational, slowly accelerating toward the core of the galaxy, directly aimed at the overlapping sectors of the conquered and human space. The structure is what we call a silent leviathan, a megastructure of unknown, impossible origin. Its energy signature is beyond classification. We believe it has been dormant for eons. The transmission we followed and the one we now observe is a low-frequency repeating pulse, a mathematical prime sequence, a beacon of immense power. But the pulse is not a greeting, it is a system check. And the movement signature is one of inexorable, calculated trajectory, Captain Thorne stated, his voice grave. The ultimate twist had landed with the crushing weight of cosmic inevitability. The entire conflict, the tension, the mobilization of the 100,000 ships, the terror, the diplomatic deadlock, was revealed to be a mere planetary quarrel, a philosophical skirmish that had consumed valuable time while a true, existential threat was silently awakening on the rim. The Conquered, focused on its internal politics and technological arrogance, had been completely blind to the true darkness gathering at the edge of the universe. Our initial survey concluded that any civilization capable of constructing and operating a device of this magnitude would possess technology that makes the Peregrine look primitive, Thorne continued, his eyes meeting the collective ocular with a somber seriousness. We did not come to challenge the conquered, but to follow a ghost and verify a threat. The conquered defense fleet, which we found so alarming, is now, statistically, the largest single organized defense structure between the silent Leviathan and the populated sectors. Our single vessel, which you correctly identified as dangerous, is now a critical, singular piece of tactical and technological knowledge that your entire collective urgently requires to calibrate a viable defense. Ambassador Kalen, his initial shock giving way to a cold, Valen analytical focus, spoke into the void. Captain Thorne, the parameters of this crisis are shifting with impossible speed. Your species' capacity for defensive non-escalation, while ethically profound, is irrelevant against an entity of this magnitude. What is humanity's capacity for sustained, coordinated offensive engagement against a force that manipulates stellar energy? This is the critical query. Thorne offered a slow, grim smile. Ambassador, we transcended localized warfare by rendering it obsolete, but we did not eliminate the capacity for organized, mass-scale kinetic defense. We merely refined it. The knowledge we just transferred, the unified field mechanics, is the foundation for more than just defensive shielding. It is the key to creating focused, localized space-time distortions capable of fracturing the structural integrity of megastructures. We did not bring a large arsenal on the Peregrine because it was unnecessary, not because we lacked the knowledge to build one. Humanity learned to walk away from small wars, but we never forgot how to fight for the survival of the collective whole. We are prepared, and we have protocols for this exact theoretical scenario. We call it the Horizon Protocol. He paused, a commanding figure on the screen, no longer a diplomat, but a general offering a critical solution. The Peregrine is one ship, but behind it, across the vast gulf of space, are the human sovereign worlds and their full, coordinated industrial capacity, now dedicated to manufacturing the necessary components of the Horizon Protocol. We can produce the necessary field disruptors, but we cannot do it alone. We require raw materials, industrial capacity, and the logistical expertise of a major galactic power. We require the conquered. The final, unifying proposal hung in the enormous chamber, a stark counterpoint to the political machinations of the past 72 cycles. The Peregrine, initially seen as a singular, hostile aberration, had become the crucial bridge to survival. The 100,000 ships of the conquered, once the ultimate symbol of their military might, were now the necessary, indispensable muscle for a joint, existential defense effort. The title of the crisis had been transformed. It was no longer 100,000 aliens vs. one human dangerous ship, but 100,000 aliens and one human dangerous ship vs. the unthinkable. Delegate Lyra's crystalline form shone with an intense, steady light, a reflection of the profound clarity that had finally settled upon the ancient race. The conquered has been blind, crippled by its own comfort and technological hubris. We focused our fear on the proximate, the knowable, and the politically manageable. The humans, whom we dismissed as volatile children, have proven themselves to be the moral and ethical vanguard, forcing us to confront a truth we could not see. That true power is the combination of immense capacity and absolute restraint. Strategos Vash, Ambassador Kalen, there is no longer a debate. The Assembly must ratify an immediate, full-spectrum alliance with the human sovereign worlds under the parameters of the Horizon Protocol. We must integrate the Peregrine's knowledge into our defense structures with maximum urgency. Strategos Vash, his previous fury now channeled into a cold, military determination, finally spoke, his voice steady. The Krill hierarchs will mobilize the industrial and logistical capacity of our sectors. We will retrofit our capital ships with the human-derived unified field technology. The collective might of the encirclement will be redeployed for a unified, coordinated defense. The philosophical debate is over. The practical reality of survival begins now. Captain Thorne, the conquered accepts your protocol and your alliance. The decision, made with a speed born of absolute terror and clarity, echoed throughout the vast chamber. The fear had not dissipated, but it had been given a new, singular, external target, unifying the disparate, often contentious species of the conquered into a singular, cohesive purpose. The sight of the vast, uncountable conquered fleet on the ocular, now being digitally overlaid with tactical markers and new, human-derived system calibrations, was an image of profound, fragile hope. Captain Thorne's face on the screen, calm and steady amidst the maelstrom of galactic crisis, offered a final, sober reflection that cemented the emotional climax of the event. The universe assembly does not reward arrogance, nor does it tolerate stasis. You feared the single, silent ship because you feared the unknown power. That power, that knowledge, was a gift born of humanity's painful ethical evolution. We learned that the measure of a civilization is not how efficiently it can destroy its enemies, but how resolutely it chooses to protect all life when faced with extinction. We are not saviors. We are merely the ones who learned the lesson first. Now, we face the great darkness together. We have much to learn from your logistical might and your collective history, just as you have much to absorb from our physics. The oculars slowly dissolved the image of Captain Thorne and the megastructure, returning the focus to the single, black hull of the HMS Peregrine, now surrounded by the digital overlay of the vast, shifting conquered fleet. The fleet, once an aggressive, encircling threat, now reorientated its vector, its countless ships turning their collective gaze outward, toward the distant, approaching darkness of the silent Leviathan. The single, small human vessel, the source of such intense fear and political instability, was now positioned at the absolute vanguard of the Conquered's mobilization, its black hull the spear tip of an unimaginable defensive alliance. The ultimate lesson was etched into the mind of every delegate. The true danger of the single human ship was not its capacity for war, but its capacity to change the philosophy of an entire galaxy. Humanity had arrived not with a fleet of cannons, but with a single vessel carrying the only weapon that mattered in the cosmic scale, the absolute, ethical refusal to use power for anything other than defense and preservation. The Conquered had faced its worst fear, the potential annihilation of their status and technological superiority, only to find that the very source of that fear was the only thing that offered them a future. The long silence of the assembly finally broke, replaced by the unified, determined hum of 1,000 species preparing for a fight far grander and far more terrifying than any they had ever imagined, a fight they would face with a single, calm, and utterly dangerous human ship leading the way. The spiral of the chamber, once a symbol of fragmented sovereignty, now rotated as one, unified in its profound, terrifying knowledge of the true cosmic scale, forever altered by the arrival of the Peregrine.